Alcohol. My name's John.
Hey, John.
So I guess it worked. I told everybody last week they didn't have to come. And if you guys are here and you were there last week, I feel for you. I also heard last week Chuck was talking to Brad and said that he had to book me 2 weekends in a row because it'd take me at least one meeting or one speaking meeting to explain about all my ex-wives. So I'm going to try not to talk too much about them. They are a part of my life, but and some of them were sort of integral in how I got here. So my name's John, and I'm an alcoholic. I've actually got 2 sponsors right at the moment. I've been trying to train Bob to be a sponsor for me for about 2 years now, and we haven't quite got there yet. And but we're working on it. I'm real slow. My other problem is I'm not here a lot, so it makes it really difficult. I don't sponsor anybody. I try to help a lot of people, as many people as I can. Being a sponsor early for people that are in early recovery requires a lot of individual time. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm self-centered and I'm not here, and I don't want to give somebody what they don't need. And if you're not here to give it to them, it's a disservice to them, you know. And so I choose not to sponsor people that are early in recovery. I'm just not here. So anyway, today's actually a very special day in my recovery. Today, 37 years ago, was my last day of drinking and using. You know? Actually 36 years ago, and 37 would be tomorrow. I didn't have anything, I didn't put anything in me after that. So how I got there, you know, I've been in these rooms for 37 years tomorrow. So that's a lot to talk about. I need to tell you guys how I sort of got here, and I'm going to sort of jump around a little bit so you guys can get it. So 37 years ago tonight, me and an ex-wife were down to the hours before she went into treatment. I was the significant other. I was the victim in all this. You know? And trust me, I was not the victim. And I'll explain that a little bit, but we were down to the hours before she went to treatment the next day, tomorrow. And it was a Tuesday. The Monday, the Saturday before that, she had called. She'd moved back to Raleigh several years before then, when we got divorced and everything, and she called and asked if she could come back down, and she needed some help. Now, I don't know why she figured I knew something about getting her help, but I said yeah. But you know, my motives weren't pure by nobody's stretch of anybody's imagination. You know, I wanted her back for my own reasons. Now, it came about that actually in the back of my mind, I did know something about recovery and that and what she sort of needed to do. And so that she came down that Sunday, and that Monday she went over here to Pinehurst and talked to them. I took her over there and that, and she told them that she would be glad to go to treatment, but she had to have another day. She'd go on Wednesday, because she was a good alcoholic. She needed at least a day to prepare to go in, and that's what we did. We prepared for a whole day. Actually, part of Monday afternoon and Monday night and Tuesday morning and Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday night. We drank everything I absolutely had in my house. We used everything that I absolutely had in my house. And somewhere in that day and a half, we talked. And I told her that if she was going to do this, then I would not drink and use while she was there. Now, I don't know how I got that. Now, I had another ex-wife that I'd been divorced from for about 5 years, and she'd gone to treatment and had about 5 years of recovery. And she really never talked to me about recovery, other than when I went up and saw her on Victims' Days, the family days, and she broke my heart then, because she said that the truth wasn't in me, and she didn't want me to be any part of her life. And she said, there's no possible way you're ever going to get sober. And other than that, she really never talked to me about it again. Now, in that 5 years, we had a child together before, and in that 5 years, she would let me pick up our son. And I would literally go and pick him up on Friday or Saturday, depending on how sober I was. And literally, half the time I'd be throwing up on her doorstep. And she never said a word to me. Like, she never said, you can't have it. You can't take it. Now, after I got in these rooms, she talked to me about that, and she said, I did a lot of praying. I prayed that something would happen, that nobody would get hurt. But I prayed a lot that something would happen for you to change. I'm grateful for that. Had she said something to me in that 5 years, I probably wouldn't. It would have stopped me from coming in these rooms. And that's the kind of person I was. I was ego-driven. I was self-centered, very self-centered. So February is a strange month in 1987. 1987, we didn't have cell phones. We had telephones, so it was a miracle in itself that ex-wife was able to get a hold of me. I was living out on a 100-acre farm not too far away from where I live now, and it was 5 miles from a highway. You got off a highway and went down a little paved town road, and got off that little paved town road, and then went down a county clay road, and went down the end of that county clay road, and my driveway was there with a gate on it, and you went down my driveway about a mile, and then there was my house. And what I was doing in that month was using and drinking every possible thing I could do. That year was pretty miserable. I did a lot of construction back then, so that year before I'd been in Texas with Bob and two other guys that weren't from here. They were from Michigan, but Bob grew up here in that, and Bob was definitely one of us. In the men's toilet, there's a sticker on top of the toilet, and Bob put that sticker on there. Bob died because of this disease. He didn't make it in here. He was too smart. Bob was a really intelligent guy. He just couldn't make it. But when we were down there in Texas, we had 4 guys living in a house, and we couldn't keep the lights on. And we were working every day, and all of us were electricians, and we're getting union pay, And we were working all the overtime we wanted, 7 days a week. Couldn't keep lights on, couldn't keep cable vision on, couldn't keep gas on. They literally took the transformer off the pole because we jumped it out. We jumped out the gas. They took the meter and we just jumped around it. We did the same thing with the cable vision. You know, we're pretty smart people as addicts and alcoholics. We can do about what we want if we got to. Rather than pay the man, we could buy dope, drink a lot of beer, drink a lot of liquor, and that's what we did. We all got kicked out of that house, and shortly after that, Bob's wife told Bob he had a solution to figure out. And one was he could either stay there and be drunk with all of us, or he could come home with her and get some help. Bob chose to send her home and told her he'd be home. He was a good alcoholic. He'd be home in about a month afterwards, you know. And when me and him left, Bob had a bad habit. You got to know this guy, but Bob had a bad habit of stealing. So when we left that day, that Saturday morning that we left, Bob stole 3 pounds of pot and about an ounce and a half of crystal, basically bathroom or bathtub meth and that. And I was finishing packing and all that, and Bob comes back and says, "We got to go." I said, "Like, I got stuff I'm still packing and everything." He said, "We got to go, and we got to go now." And by the time we got to Houston, then he started telling me why we had to go so fast, you know, because these guys were on his ass. So anyway, our using was that kind of using, and our drinking was that kind of drinking. So that winter here, it snowed and it sleeted a lot in February, and the power was out and everything. And I think that was probably part of the motivating factor why Sandra called me, because her power was out up there in Raleigh and that, and you know, she didn't have anybody to take care of. It was basically what it was, and she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had been sick and tired of being sick and tired for a lot of years before that ever happened. My first time coming into this fellowship was when I was 11 years old. I came walking in here at 11 years old, and you people looked not as young as you look now. Everybody was old. They all looked as old as me. And I didn't stay long. I stayed, a couple months or whatever, and I learned a few things out of that. I learned that I didn't need to be drinking. I didn't need to be stealing beer from my dad and stealing beer from the stores and stuff like that. I learned how to hide more, but I kept doing it. I tried to change when my son was born. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired then. I couldn't do it. Thousands upon thousands of times before I ever walked in these rooms, I quit. I stopped. I didn't quit. I stopped lots of times because I was tired of it. I wasn't happy. I hadn't been happy for a long time. Obviously, by the time I came in these rooms, I'd already been divorced 4 times. So, that tells you a lot. I wasn't happy with myself, and I damn sure wasn't happy with anybody else. And I married people just like me. My son's mom, I met her at, I don't know if there's anybody here, there might be a couple people here that remembers Joe's After Hours Club there in West Southern Pines, but I met her there about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe been 4 o'clock in the morning. We were standing outside drinking beer and talking shit, and I see this young lady in shorts. It was springtime. See her walk outside in shorts, and she jumps in my friend's car, and I see her bend over, and all of a sudden I hear the car crank up, and I told the guy standing there, I said, damn. Anybody can hotwire a car is who I want to marry, and look like that? Shit. That's what I did. A year later, we were married. Now, this tells you how sick and crazy I am. She was Catholic, and I converted to Catholicism just to get married. That tells you what extremes I'll do to do what I need to get the dope that I need to have. Because she was a dope to me. I had to have it. Just like drinking was. I had to have it. So, and like I said, the good thing was she came in these rooms after our son was born, and she never said a word to me that I can remember. Sandra called me that weekend before and said she wanted some help, and I said, sure, let's do this thing. And I took her over to Pinehurst, and that was the journey that started. And you know, she went to treatment, and I was the significant other, and I'd go over there just like every other boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse or whatever you want to call it of people that are in treatment. Somebody's going to get to a cell phone or a pay phone or something and call them, come on and let's meet up, and I'll see you at the meeting. And back then Pinehurst actually had a treatment center, so they would bring people on the bus down here on Saturday night, and I didn't know that. They also had a Friday night meeting there. And I went to that Friday night meeting probably 2 weeks after she walked in the doors, and she told me to come on and meet her there, and I met her there, and the meeting was full in that room down there on the first floor that doesn't exist anymore, and I was sitting there on the floor and everything, and people were talking, and I suddenly realized that I'd been dry for 2 weeks. Now I was shaking out of my skin. I want to tell you all this. There wasn't a shower hot enough, a bathtub long enough, and I couldn't sleep. In that 2 weeks, I was absolutely driving myself crazy, but I wasn't drinking. I wasn't using. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I wasn't doing it. And I sat there on that floor and came to the realization that you guys were talking about me. I came to the realization that I was it. It all came flooding back in, the drinking and all the stuff that I'd done in the 33 years before I walked in these rooms all caught up with me. But it hadn't caught up yet. I just started getting a glimpse of the realization of what it was about. So another couple of weeks, and she gets out of treatment, I think like maybe 2 or 3, 4 days early, and we start going to meetings. So at that time, in 1987, there was this meeting here, and this meeting here was attended by everybody within 5 counties. Everybody that was part of Alcoholics Anonymous basically came to this building. This building was it. There was a lot of people here. And there was a lot of people here that were basically semi-first generation or second generation alcoholics that had come in these rooms, and they got sober in the 60s. They got sober in the 50s. Some of them got sober in the 40s. Had a lot of time here, and they knew a lot of people because there were a lot of people from all over the United States that lived here in this area. So they knew a lot of people. I wouldn't know to the extent of that until later on in my recovery and being inside these rooms, how important that was and how great a gift that was. So anyway, I'm coming to these meetings. There was a meeting here on Saturday night. There was a meeting here on Tuesday night. That was it. There was a meeting at the hospital on Friday night. There was a meeting at West End on Sunday night. The meeting at Bass had just started. And there was a meeting on Monday night at Emmanuel Episcopal Church, which was the original meeting of this Southern Pines, Aberdeen area. And it was there. And that was it. Now, so you had to do a little driving, and so I did that and everything, and like I said, I was a significant other at the time. I hadn't even realized I was alcoholic yet. I knew that I was having problems, and I was associating with you guys and everything, and I was going to meetings and taking her to meetings and that, and I knew people that were in these rooms. I saw people like AJ and a bunch of other people that I knew that I used to drink with, and were at Flynn's and Mad Dogs Underground and Club 21 and all these other places around here. So the Pines used to be a big bar town back in the 70s and that, and 80s. So I'm going to these meetings, and about February, March, April. So the second weekend of April, at that time, there's this big, giant East Coast cocktail party out there on Youngs Road called Stony Brook. And it was touted as being one of the biggest cocktail parties on the East Coast. And I had done good, man. I want y'all to know, I had started way the hell out in the outfield 20 years earlier, and I had moved up to 5 cars away from the finish line. That took skill. The other thing is, when you came, you usually got 2 car parking places because you parked the car there so you could haul people in. The other car area was so that you could set up your tent and tables and all that for all the booze and everything else you were doing. And it was huge. It was huge. There'd be, 20,000 people there. The place was packed of drunks. So my first year of going not drunk, you see, all these people that came with me year after year before then came to my house, and we went to Stony Brook. Now they were drunk, and I was sober, and she was, well, let me rephrase that. I hadn't gotten sober. I was dry, folks. I hadn't got close to being sober. But I was dry, and I was nervous I can't explain how nervous I was, so we went to Stony Brook and I actually had a pretty good time considering, all these people drinking around me and everything, and it was basically a big party, and we went back to the house and had another big party there and everything, and so about 7:30 that evening, on Saturday evening that night, I said, I got to go. I'm going to a meeting. Of course, nobody gave a shit. And I came down here and went to the meeting. Now, that's not really that significant, except for the fact that I had the determination to come. So what happened was another sequence of events that happened the next day. That young lady that that I became abstinent for that Sunday said, I think I want to go to the beach. I said, well, you think that's a good idea? Yeah, I'll be all right. So she went to the beach. About 2 weeks later, she calls me up and says, I ain't coming back. Now, I don't know what happens to y'all, but I am now somewhere close to 90 days without anything in my body, and my body is screaming. But things have gotten better. As bad as it was, things had gotten better. And I wasn't willing to change, to go back. As bad as that hurt, you know. I was lucky that Richard Page, and Richard's dead now, so he doesn't care. And Lee, I used to use with both of them a lot. Lee was his wife and that, and Lee was working at a treatment center over in Fayetteville, and I had met a couple people there, and I called Richard, and he said, well, why don't you call Lee and see if you can go over to that treatment center, maybe they can help you a little bit, because I was absolutely shaking out of my skin that I was going to get drunk. I'd lost the whole reason to stay sober. Had walked out of my life. And that's why they talk about that it's not good to get sober for somebody else or something else or whatever, that you need to get sober for yourself. I experienced that moment of clarity. So I go over there and I meet Keith Lewis and Dick Corcoran, and Dick's is dead, Keith is dead, and Bob is dead. Dick's wife is Bonnie. She's still alive here and lives over there close to Southern Lakes, between Pinehurst and Southern Lakes, and she's going to celebrate 50 years next month. So I get to meet them, and they're running this treatment center, and they said, well, you know, just come early in the morning. You can stay as long as you want, and go to the classes for free and whatever. So I go every day, and every day they'd get up with me about 4:30 and ask me it'd be either Dick or Keith, and they'd ask me, well, what do you want to do, John? What do you want to do? And I'd tell them what I wanted to do. I wanted to have her back, and my car back, and my job back, and I want money, and I want this, and I wanted that, and there wasn't anything about wanting to stay sober. So on Friday of that week, it's really getting to me because I'm going to these classes and they're teaching all this AA junk, and I'm listening because I ain't got nothing to do. But my attention span at that time was probably about the length of a gnat's ass, but I was catching it, and it was starting to hit home. And so on Friday, it was odd because Dick and Keith, I guess they sort of figured out he's either going to stay and we're going to start charging him money, or he's going to leave. So they ganged up on me on Friday afternoon and said, so John, what do you want to do? And I started crying. And I said, the only thing I know what I want to do is I just don't want to drink anymore. I don't want to feel the way I feel now. I don't want to feel the way I felt for the last 20 years. And Dick slaps me on the back and says, you got it, son. Now go to Aberdeen tomorrow and start talking to people. What I didn't realize is I had just done the first step. My recovery started that day. My abstinence had started earlier, and it took that from me. But my recovery started that day. My recovery started the day that I chose to, after Stony Brook, go to a meeting. It's all about making, and what I found out later in my recovery since I've been here, it's all about making decisions about your recovery. And you get lots of opportunities to make decisions of whether you want to stay in these rooms or don't want to stay in these rooms. So my recovery started then, and so I started coming in meetings, and I met these people here, and they were really great people, and oh man, there's so many people that had so much recovery in these rooms that really were pivotal in my life. Taught me a lot. One of the great things was that I had a lot of conversations right out there in that parking lot, and it wasn't a parking lot back then. It was dirt. You know, there wasn't no asphalt. And I'd sit out there on the back of the tailgate and grab somebody that I knew, and we'd talk and 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 talk. And there was this little restaurant down the road here called Howard Johnson's then, and Howard Johnson stayed open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and people would leave these meetings here and go down to Howard Johnson's, and they had a whole room back there on one side where everybody would go and eat and drink coffee after the meetings, when you arrived was when they would ask you and you would accept. So being asked was pretty commonplace. Accepting to go down there was hard for a newcomer. It was hard for me. And so I started accepting on going down there. And those people taught me millions of things about life and recovery, and all these people that they knew all over the United States and everything that were in these rooms, and going to meetings, and the value of going to meetings, value of sponsorship. So my first sponsor was Dick, and Dick didn't turn out to be my sponsor very long. Probably about 6-8 months. Dick was too rigid for me. I also at the same time started going to this group down there in Rockingham, and it was about a different fellowship, and but I related to them because they were all my age. They weren't looking like you guys, and they didn't look old, and I started going to that group and everything, and that was an odd meeting down there. Now, they talk about in these rooms about guys 13-stepping women in these rooms, but I'm here to tell you I got 13th step down there at that meeting. Now, I was an easy volunteer. I mean, it didn't take much. She was married. I didn't care. And she came up, and I asked her real poignant questions. What do you want with me? She said, I want what you got. And shit, my head just blew up on both ends. And so I took off with that. Now, when you have a small group of people in a meeting, and half of them are married, and the other half aren't, and you know how gossip is. Everybody in this room knows what gossip is inside these rooms. So it didn't take long, and the people in that meeting down there said, they got together one night when I went down there and said, John, you ain't welcome here. You need to go someplace else. Now, so my feelings got hurt. The sad part about it was what happened was I don't know that it was sad or good. What happened was I could have walked out that room and used and drank. What I chose to do was come up here to a meeting, and I knew some other people up here, and we started a group up here in Southern Pines. That's what I chose to do. And then what I started doing was I'd go down there out of spite. I was a spiteful son of a bitch when I first got in these rooms, and I didn't mind telling you. I was mean, I was arrogant, I was full of myself and everything else, and you know, I didn't go to treatment. I learned what I learned from the guys in these rooms that started teaching me, and what I wanted to accept. You know, I look at the guys that go to the people that go to treatment centers and that, and I go, one hand says, oh wow, they're so lucky they learn. You know, they learned all this stuff and everything and all that, and the other hand is maybe not so much, because I see a lot of people go out and use again. But I made a decision. And all the things that happened to me since I walked in these doors, I still kept making decisions. I didn't have a softer, easier way. It was a hard, sort of a life of hard knocks in a way. And I sometimes it's a good debate on which one I want, or which one I have, or which one would have been better. But I'm dealt with the cards that I'm dealt with, and that, and so I go and we start having this other meeting, which is really good because it's relating on a lot of stuff that I used to do other than drink. And I really started doing the steps and traditions there, even though I was doing the steps and traditions here. My first sponsor, though, was a guy who came out of Folsom Prison out there in California, and this guy was so crazy he had tattoos on his tongue, man. And he was a crazy guy. I ended up having to fire him about 2 years later because Bonnie, Dick's wife, was running the Pinehurst Treatment Center, and she came and talked to me one day, and she said, "John, you need to do something about him." And I said, "It's not my job, it's your job to do something." She said, "You know, he's in there trying to talk people on leaving the meetings and running off with him and all this other kind of stuff. You need to do something." And so I went and talked to him and told him basically if he goes back in there, they're going to throw his ass in jail, and oh, by the way, you're fired for being my sponsor, because I don't know that I want to follow you in your footsteps. You're not a very good example of what I want in my life. So I bounced around for a little while and found a couple sponsors and stuff like that, and nobody I particularly liked in that, and did a lot of step work, which I'm grateful for. AA started growing. It was weird. It was a weird time back then because it went from a little bit to a whole lot. They started the Wednesday night meeting here. They started the Thursday night meeting here. Started the Sunday morning 11th step. Started having other meetings around the county and stuff like that, and the other fellowship grew by leaps and bounds and all that, which is really great and everything. And I became a large part of that fellowship just as much as I came in here. Something started happening, though, was at the time that I was going to that other fellowship, after about 10 years of coming here and going there, at the other fellowship I had the most time, and all those people started saying, "Oh, you know what you're talking about." and I was just another drunk, another addict, and I didn't know nothing, to be perfectly honest with you. I was doing the best I could with what I had, and that wasn't very good a lot of times. And so I decided to take a long vacation from the other fellowship. And Mac Bibbins, which most of you guys probably, there might be about 4 or 5 people here that knew Mac, and Mac was my sponsor at the time, and Mac, I went and talked to Mac about it and everything. He said, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. He said, I'm going to take you over to a meeting there in Southern Pines that just left Bronson. They started their own meeting over there, and that meeting's got more ego and more time than you'll ever get or that you'll ever need. And I went over there, and that was the primary purpose group, and he was absolutely right. There was a lot of ego over there, and there was a lot of time there, you know. There's a lot of time there. I remember going to that meeting and everything, and the same month that my birthday is in February, Tom Ivester had his birthday in February, and Wallace had his birthday in February. And somebody else had their birthday in February, and they all had double my time. Every year had double. So I was like a beginner at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. I think Tom died with 56 years, something like that. Wallace died with 54, 55. And, those guys taught a lot. Somewhere in there, when I had about 20 years, 15 years, no, it was about 15 years, I think. Chuck's probably not one of the few people. Actually, Bill, I was working over at Bill's place when he was building a place over there in Pinehurst and that, and my 5th wife walked in there to get a sandwich, and she had just left the gym, and I said, yeah, I'm going to marry that one. And I did. I don't know that I regret it, but it was a lot of years of somebody that needed a lot of help, and I was unable to help her. She struggled. She's still struggling with this disease, as far as I know. And we've been divorced for a long time now. We've been divorced 14, 15 years now. And that, and I hate it for her. She's a nice lady. Everybody I've ever married were nice people. It's just that drugs and alcohol were bad, and I wasn't any help, even after I got sober. So my life got complicated. I got a lot of stuff after I got clean and sober and that inside these rooms, and about the time I got divorced from Betty Ann, I had a federal indictment for bid rigging, and I basically lost my company and lost a lot of money and all kinds of stuff, and had to start over again in my life. I was totally insane. I was totally insane, totally alone, and didn't know what to do. And I was lucky that I'd had the sponsor Neil. I had Neil as a sponsor at that time for maybe 6, 7 years, something like that. And Neil actually used to drive around Bob and Bill up there in New Hampshire, so he knew the founders. And that's the kind of people I hung out with, were a lot of these people that knew the original 100. You know, they weren't part of the original 100, but they hung out with them. And all that's gone now, just about. There's very few people that are around anymore that do that, or that are still living. So anyway, and Neil was really great, and I'm literally going insane at that time, and Neil comes over, and he and I just vomit on him, basically, of all the troubles I've got and everything, and he just looks at me the way Neil did and everything. You're missing a great thing not knowing him, but Neil would just looked at me and said, you know how to build a rabbit box? And I'm like, my first thought is, what's a rabbit box got to do with what's going on in my life? And he said, do you know how to build a rabbit box? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, obviously, John, you're not going to starve to death. Now get off your ass, go to meetings, get a job, get some work, and do what you're supposed to do. You know, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. Becoming productive members of society. Not living in a halfway house for 3 years or 2 years. Not living off the state for years on years on years on years. It's about becoming a productive member of society. You know, own what you've done, what you're doing. That was tough to hear. And I had, 20 years at that time? I didn't want to hear that junk. So I got about 5 minutes. That man was probably one of the most pivotal people in my life, other than my parents. My parents damn near loved me to death. But I loved them. I had the opportunity of taking care of my dad before he died, and I had the opportunity to take care of my mom before she died for years. Both of them. And I appreciate that. This fellowship gave me that opportunity. I was thinking about coming up here and speaking sometime this week, and came to the realization that I'm basically by myself, and I've got to be an adult. I don't have a mom and I don't have a dad. I don't have any family members. I got a son. I got some grandkids. So I'm it. I got to make decisions. And I'm so grateful for these rooms for giving me the opportunity to make decisions and become an adult. When I walked in these rooms, I don't think I had maybe a couple $100. I had hair down to here, somewhere in that neighborhood.